138 Yada Yahowah, Bersith. Beginning. 4. Or, light. And there was light. Yahweh's open letter to humankind began. In the beginning, at the start of time, Barishith, the Almighty, Elohim, for accompaniment and association, created, conceiving and causing a new existence, Bara, of the spiritual world of the heavens, Ha-Shamim, along with, the material realm, Ha-Eres. Bersith 1-1. The material realm, Ha-Eres, existed, higher, formless and without shape, lacking organization, Towu, a disorderly and chaotic space, Borwu, dark and unknowable, Choshik, in proximity to, Al, the presence, Pana, of the vast power and unapproachable energy of the Big Bang, Taham. Then, the spirit, Ruach, of the Almighty, Elohim, hovered over and administered to, Rachafal, the appearance, Pana, of the fluid state, Mame. Bersith 1-2. In addition, God, Elohim, said, Amar, let there continuously be, higher, light, or, and, light, or, exist, higher. Bersith 1-3. And so, the Almighty, Elohim, saw, that the association with, the light, or, was truly, good, beneficial and productive, having desirable and positive qualities. Tob. 139 God, Elohim, caused the ongoing separation, Badal, between, Bayan, the light, or, and, its association with, Bayan, the darkness, Choshik. Bersith, Genesis 1-4. God's creative testimony was accurate when he revealed that, cosmologically, time began the moment energy became matter. Before the conversion of energy to matter, time did not and could not exist. In fact, Yahweh's suggestion that the material realm was formless and disorderly initially, syncs with current scientific thought, whereby matter is considered to be nothing more than an organized form of energy. Also noteworthy, Bersith indicates that before Yahweh created the light energy which became the cosmos, there was a lifeless, purposeless void. Scientists are in lockstep confirming that, before the Big Bang, there were no physical laws, no matter, or life, only a powerful source of energy. Furthermore, we now know that the inception of the universe was incredibly chaotic, and that chaos actually has redeeming qualities. In the beginning, light was literally separated from darkness. Photons broke free as electrons were liberated. Even today light remains supreme, there are more photons in the universe than particles of matter. God's testimony, let there be light and there was light, is consistent with our observable reality. According to scientists, the universe began approximately 14 billion years ago, plus or minus a billion years, at least from our perspective on Earth looking back at the Big Bang. That duration equates to 6 days from the perspective of the Creator at the time and place of universal genesis according to his testimony. Both suggest that the first cosmic epoch, that of initial star and galactic formation, lasted 7 billion years from our vantage point, which is 1/24-hour day measured from 140 the relative position of creation looking forward. So how is that possible, you may be wondering? Light, the subject of day 1, is the eternal timekeeper. Its wave aspect allows man to measure time throughout the cosmos, even near the place where time began. But to appreciate this we must first understand something about time itself. And for instruction on this subject, the best place to turn is to Albert Einstein. He brought forth the theory of general relativity which establishes the relationship between light, mass, energy, space, and time. He was the first to discover that the rate at which time passes is not uniform in all places. Differences in mass and velocity radically affect the rate at which time flows. This aspect of the general theory of relativity is considered to be an established physical law. The only aspects of relativity in dispute are those related to quantum mechanics, to the lack of cause and effect, even certainty, at the subatomic level, and whether gravity is a force or an effect, bending of the fabric of spacetime. However, there is no dispute that time is a dimension, not a constant, and that its rate of flow is relative. The pace of time flows more slowly in proximity to greater mass, energy, or velocity than in proximity to diminished mass, energy, or velocity. We can confirm this shift by measuring the 2 parts per million a light wave is stretched emanating in the presence of the greater mass of the Sun relative to a light wave generated on Earth. The Sun's clock runs 2.12 1/millionths slower than Earth's, losing 67 seconds a year relative to a terrestrial timepiece. But the Sun is only marginally more massive than the Earth, especially compared to creation, to the concentration of energy and mass required to give birth to 7 septillion suns. And that's just the known universe, representing a scant 4% of 141. The total, 96% of the energy and mass in the cosmos is considered dark because its nature is unknown to us. We do not have to guess the rate at which time flowed in these conditions. The measurement is screaming out to us in one form, it is observable in a second medium, it is calculable in a third, and the rate is deducible in a fourth venue. The pace time flowed at creation cries out from the entire universe in photon radiation in the form of cosmic microwave background, CMB, an elongated part of the electromagnetic spectrum with a wavelength of 1.9 mm, and a frequency of 160.4 GHz. The CMB is a measure of the residual heat left over from the time photons were first freed to travel, perhaps 300,000 years after the Big Bang. It was discovered when Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias tried to resolve the universal presence of static in their new systems at the Bell Labs in 1964. What they found is that cosmic microwave background radiation is the residue of the aftermath of creation. It provides us with a cosmic clock calibrated to a time close to day 1 of Genesis, Be'esith, in the beginning. The CMB wavelength is stretched approximately 1 millionfold, confirming that Genesis time flowed slower by a factor of 1012. More on this in a moment. A second glimpse of the Creator's clock can be gleaned by observing the redshift, or lengthening of wavelengths emitted from the oldest and most distant sources of light and comparing this expansion to the rate the universe has and is growing. To understand this, we turn to Professor Peebles, who was named the Albert Einstein Professor of Science at Princeton University. In his textbook, The Principles of Physical Cosmology, Princeton University Press, Dr. Peebles, who has established himself as the world's foremost authority on cosmology, explains that when the universe was small, it was doubling very rapidly. But as the cosmos grew, the 142 time required to double in size got exponentially longer. He, concurring with almost all cosmological texts, quotes 1012 as the average rate of expansion. This yields a general relationship between Genesis time and time today, indicating that they are different by a factor of 1 million. This concept is fairly simple. When space was stretched, so were the wavelengths within it. The redshift, or stretching due to the expansion of space, is commonly observed in astronomical data, and it now confirms that time originally flowed a trillion times slower than it does today. The calculable, and third, insight into creation's clock, and how it differs from ours today, is found by dividing the temperature of quark confinement, when light energy could be successfully transformed into matter following the Big Bang, by temperature recorded across the universe today of 2.73 degrees Kelvin, the measure of the CMB. By comparison, the temperature at the instant of the explosion precipitating universal genesis was approximately 1.6 by 1012 K. This ratio is relevant because the more massive the presence of energy, the more slowly time flows. The resulting calculation serves to indicate that our clock runs 0.85 by 1012, around 600 billion, times faster than the Creator's clock while initiating the Big Bang. While the 0.85 by 1012 calculation implies precision, in actuality, it is a moving target. While physicists have calculated that quarks can break free from their positions inside protons and neutrons at around 2 trillion Kelvin, we do not know if this is the temperature at which the quark gluon plasma changes into matter at certain pressures and distances. And this is vital to our understanding because prior to the transition from energy to matter, the concept of time did not exist. 143 Due to the influence of distance and pressure on the strong force pursuant to quark confinement, it would be rational to conclude that quarks, which serve as the building blocks of matter, would have begun to coalesce at a lower temperature than they are liberated. The estimate is 130 megaelectronvolts. Based upon the research published in 2019 by Odomu Isifu and Francisco Brito, entitled, The Deconfinement Transition in Tachyonic Matter at Finite Temperature, we now know that confinement is favored at short distances and low temperatures, whereas deconfinement shows up at long distances and higher temperatures in the tachyon matter. That is relevant because the confinement of quarks coincides with tachyon condensation. In the confining phase, there is a spontaneous chiral symmetry breaking, while at the deconfining phase, there is a restoration of the symmetry. While this may seem overly complex, ascertaining the temperature at which point quarks would have been confined, turning energy into matter after the Big Bang, is essential to calculating the age of the cosmos. This determination is the basis for the currently touted, albeit upwardly migrating, 13.8 billion year estimate of the age of the universe. Therefore, it is germane to recognize that the strong force between quarks increases geometrically with distance, which means that these particles need large amounts of energy to remain free. Therefore, a quark gluon plasma, aka quark soup, exists at exceedingly high temperatures. When the cosmos cooled through separation, quarks and gluons could combine to form composite particles such as protons and neutrons. Exactly what this temperature is, however, has not been easy to work out. The current data set on quark liberation was derived from the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, but it relies upon 144, an experiment conducted in a very small, confined space with targeted interactions, which is the antithesis of the conditions following the randomness and enormity of universal conception. I share this with you to say that when scientists state that the universe is 13.8 billion years, they are extrapolating based upon the data observed in the LHC, even though they know it does not represent the conditions of creation and that it is for liberation, not confinement. What this means to us is that we do not know how much time expired from the Big Bang with the enormous release of energy to the point matter formed as a result of the temperature falling sufficiently for quarks to be confined. And it is only from this moment that time began to flow. And since the laws of physics do not apply to the intervening period, and since time did not yet exist at the point of the controlled explosion of energy, we would be wise to look at 13.8 billion years, plus or minus a billion years. In that he was the first to make the connections which lead to understanding the timeline of our genesis. I am going to refer to, and on occasion paraphrase, a work called The Science of God by Gerald Schroeder. He earned his doctoral degrees in nuclear physics and earth science from MIT. His book serves to present relativity, quantum mechanics, biology, and probability in terms we can more easily comprehend and appreciate. Schroeder not only deduced a similar exponent for the relative difference in the flow of time, but he was also the first to compare creation's clock to Genesis time. His reasoning can be summarized as follows: the wavelength of what we now observe as cosmic microwave background radiation was stretched, during the inflationary period, at the outset of time, in the first seconds of day 1. At creation, energy transitioned into matter consistent with Einstein's E equals mc2, with c being the speed of light, 145, which is being multiplied by itself, requiring a tiny amount of energy to form a relatively large accumulation of matter. This initial transition from energy to substance occurred when the universe was a million times smaller and hotter than it is today. We know that this is the point when time began because time only takes hold when matter forms. Yet, from the relative perspective of photon/wave energy, time literally stands still. The MIT-trained nuclear physicist went on to say that, according to the measurements taken in the most advanced physics laboratories, the temperature, and thus frequency, of radiation at the instant of creation was 1012 times hotter than the 2.730 K we now observe in the black of space. Since the Big Bang temperatures were a trillion times hotter, or more energy intense than today's observed CMB, it means that the electromagnetic wavelength must have been a trillion times shorter than it is now at its present trillion times lower temperature. The higher the temperature, the higher the frequency of the wave, and the higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelength must be. Girded with this knowledge, we can use recent nuclear laboratory calculations to deduce that the CMB is stretched by a factor of approximately 1012, or 1 trillion to 1, slowing the cosmic clock at creation relative to Earth by that amount. Therefore, on average, these 4 measurements serve to confirm that one day in the Creator's life at creation would seem like 0.85 by 1012 days to us. And none of this should be surprising since Yahowah consistently equates his nature to light, and since we now know that at the velocity of light, time stands still. Eternity only exists in the presence of the light. Before we conclude the calculations calibrating Genesis time to our own to ascertain how God and man can both be accurate and yet differ, let's take a moment to 146 explore some of the cosmological assumptions which led us to our current state of awareness. To begin, physicists contend that a concentration of energy, at the initiation of the universe produced electromagnetic waves, or photons, which were forged as the explosion cooled sufficiently to permit them to form. Persisting to this day, the photons have traveled out in all directions. The thermal soup of quarks, electrons and photons decreased in temperature, falling from 1013 degrees Kelvin to 1 billion degrees, a temperature still 67 times hotter than the sun's core. 300,000 years later, as universal energy and density dispersed and dissipated, atoms began to coalesce into gas clouds which later evolved into stars. Moving forward to our time, we find that the black body temperature of space has fallen to 2.73 Kelvin, hovering ever so slightly above absolute zero. This temperature is the remnant of the primordial fireball, still discernible through the stretching of the electromagnetic wavelength. Visible light lies in the center of the nearly infinite range of electromagnetic waves, also known as traveling packets of energy. This physical phenomenon occurs when an electric field couples with a perpendicular magnetic field. Lengths and frequencies of photon energy vary, but not speeds, at least in a vacuum. All forms of radiant energy, gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, visible light, infrared, microwave and radio waves, are manifestations of the same thing, and they all travel at the same speed, a pace so extreme that, from their perspective, time slows to the point that it no longer moves. The wavelength of electromagnetic radiation determines whether it falls within our range of vision. We see wavelengths of approximately 0.00007 centimeters, 700 nanometers, as red and 0.00004 centimeters, 400 nanometers, 147 as violet at the other extreme of the visible spectrum. By contrast, a microwave produces waves that are 10.0 centimeters long. X-rays and gamma rays from radioactive materials can be as short as 0.000000001 centimeters to 0.00000000001 centimeters. The shorter the wavelength, the higher the wave frequency and energy. A gamma ray photon, for example, packs billions of times more energy than an infrared photon. This is important because the energy we measure as CMB was emitted as gamma rays, 10 to 11 centimeters, but are now elongated microwaves, 10 centimeters, indicating that they have stretched a millionfold, confirming our 1012 exponent once again. As an interesting aside, while we can only feel infrared light and see visible light, I believe that our senses will be more receptive in our eternal state. We may be able to see and feel things that currently lie well beyond our current limitations. What I am hinting at here is that I think the universe may be comprised of 7 dimensions, not just the 4 we vaguely perceive today, and that dark matter and energy are essential components of these things. Once we recognize that the CMB is little more than a uniform sea of photons left over from the hot early phase of the universe immediately after quark confinement, we are confronted with a singular plausible explanation for having this uniform CMB radiation exist throughout the universe with such a precise spectrum. It had to be generated at a time when the cosmos was much hotter and denser than it is now. Hence the CMB spectrum is essentially incontrovertible evidence that the universe experienced a hot Big Bang stage. That is not to say that we understand the initial instant, just that we know the universe used to be vastly more energy intense and massively dense, and that 148 it expanded rapidly, becoming less dense. It has cooled ever since. It is therefore certain that the early universe was very hot. The temperature was approximately 4 times 1072 ergs. An erg is a unit of energy equivalent to 10 to 7 joules, the energy required to exert a force of 1 newton at a distance of 1 meter. This means that creation was 1012 times hotter than the universe is today on average. There was so much energy around at the time, scientists speculate that pairs of particles and antiparticles were continually created, and annihilated. This annihilation was translated into packets of light, known as photons. But as the universe expanded and the temperature fell, particles and antiparticles, quarks and the like, annihilated each other for the last time, and the energies became low enough that they couldn't be recreated again. For reasons still not understood today, the early cosmos had about 1 part in a billion more particles than antiparticles. So when all the antiparticles had annihilated their counterparts, that left about a billion photons for every particle of matter. And that's the way the universe exists today, with light remaining dominant. Now that we have some familiarity with the elements which comprise the coefficient of variance between our clock and the creators, let's examine how long this timepiece has been running. Here, Hubble's law has great significance because it quantifies the expansion of the universe and thus can be used to calculate its age. The time elapsed since the Big Bang is a function of the present value of Hubble's constant, and its rate of change. Astronomers have determined the approximate rate of expansion, but no one has yet been able to measure the effects on what was once considered a constant. Still, one can estimate the rate of change within the context of the universe's average density. Since gravity exerts a force 149 which opposes expansion, galaxies should be moving apart more slowly now than they did in the past. The rate of change in expansion is therefore related to the gravitational pull of the universe as a result of its average density. If the density is that of the visible material in and around galaxies, the age of the universe is between 12 and 18 billion years, a range which allows for the uncertainty in the rate of expansion. The Wilkinson microwave anisotropy probe provided an estimate of 13.7 billion years in 2014. In 2020, this figure was adjusted upward to 13.8 billion years. Both are a bit suspicious for 2 reasons. First, the density of the universe isn't remotely equivalent to the visible material in and around galaxies. Along these lines, this very same satellite confirmed that 96% of the energy and matter in the cosmos is unknown to us. The gravitational influence of dark matter, and the repulsive effect of dark energy has dramatic consequences for all aspects of fundamental physics, so it should have moved the age estimate to one outside of that anticipated by Hubble, 12 to 18 billion years. Further, the universe is filled with a uniform sea of quantum zero-point energy or a condensate of new particles that have a mass which is 10 to 39 times smaller than that of an electron. They should not be ignored. The second reason for skepticism is that the cosmos cannot be younger than the material from which it is comprised. There is considerable evidence that many stars, even relatively close ones, are considerably older than 13.8 billion years. Some may be up to 15 billion years old, revealing that determining the exact time which has elapsed after quark confinement remains a moving target. Apart from the Hubble redshift expansion model, and the Wilkinson-Sembe estimates, there are several other ways to evaluate the universe's age. For example, the rate of cooling of white dwarf stars indicates the oldest stars in the disk of the Milky Way galaxy are about 9 billion years old. 150 the stars in the halo of the Milky Way are much older, appearing to be somewhere around 14 to 15 billion years old, a value derived from the rate of nuclear fuel consumption in their cores. Additionally, the age of the oldest known chemical elements in the cosmos is also approximately 15 billion years old according to radioactive dating techniques. Scientists in laboratories derived these age estimates from atomic and nuclear physics. It is noteworthy that their results agree with the age astronomers calculated by measuring cosmic expansion. Now that we have evaluated some of the pieces to our puzzle, God's Big Bang testimony, man's Big Bang theory, the age of the universe, the relative nature of time, and the role of photon energy in our genesis, it's time to put it all together. The first conclusion should now be obvious. This discussion on the initiation of time, concentration of energy, inflationary stretching of space, and the transformation of light into matter serves to corroborate Yahowah's testimony. The Big Bang theory requires, and our observations confirm, that all of these things actually occurred during the cosmos birth. It is why Bersith 1-2 says the Ruach, spirit of Elohim, Almighty God was Pana, present, Rachef, hovering over and administering to the Towu, Borwu, and Shoshik, a formless, chaotic, dark, and unfathomable void of Taham, inexhaustible power and mysterious energy of the Big Bang prior to the existence of visible or light. Especially notable in this context is that one of Rachef's most prevalent connotations is agitation and rapid movement, making everything God has said thus far consistent with the evidence. The second conclusion should now be intuitive. Based upon our analysis of the cosmic clock, Yahowah's claim that the first universal epoch lasted 1 day is not in 151 conflict with the scientific assertion that it required 7 billion years. In support of this conclusion, consider the fact that while the various scientific methods for estimating the age of our universe provide differing conclusions, they all fall within the same general magnitude. So, while we cannot be dogmatic or assert that the scientific claims are precise, based upon our ability to measure it, looking back in time from the vantage point of Earth, the universe can be reasonably assumed to be between 14 and 15 billion years old plus or minus a billion years or so. The creative days of Bersith, Genesis, however, look forward, not back. Yahowah's testimony was recounted as an eyewitness, from the perspective of the Creator at creation, not from that of us on Earth. The simple truth is that no matter how self-important or self-reliant mankind chooses to be, our planet didn't exist when the universe was formed, so our perspective and clock could not have been used. With that in mind, let's compare time on Earth to its rate of flow at the point of creation. To do that we must multiply the 14 billion year estimated age of the cosmos by 365.25 days per year so that both clocks conform to the same unit of measure, that being days. 14 billion years 10,365.25 days, /year equals 5,113,500,000,000 days, plus or minus 5 to 10%. To coordinate this 5.1 trillion day period with creation's clock, respecting the relativistic nature of time, we must divide this number of Earth days since creation by the coefficient time was slowed at creation. Earlier, we deduced this number by averaging the results derived from the 4 methods from which it can be calculated. We discovered that Big Bang time ran 0.85 by 1012, 850 billion, times slower than Earth time does today. 152 so here is the math, 5,113,500,000,000 days, plus or minus 10%, divided by 850 billion equals 6 days. From the vantage point of a witness to creation, existing at the point of inception, the whole process from start to finish took a length of time that equates to 6, 24-hour, Earth days. And thus, the heavens and earth were finished, and on the 7th day God concluded his work which he had made. Bersith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:1-2. This is not a cosmic coincidence. Yahowah's timeline, his accounting, and God's 3,450-year-old written Torah testimony correspond precisely with the evidence at our disposal. If that doesn't get your attention and cause you to think that his Torah teaching might be inspired, nothing will. But we have only scratched the surface. With every layer and detail he adds, God proves that he knew how the universe was created, when it was created, and how and when life came to exist, because he was responsible. This then compels a singular informed and rational verdict: in the beginning, God created the spiritual world and also the material realm. The energy Yahweh put into his creation was perfectly calculated to produce a universe hospitable to intelligent life, and thus to meaningful relationships. By design, the resulting system required just 6 days to conceive from God's perspective, and yet, it established the environment necessary for human history to unfurl over the course of precisely 6,000 years, providing humankind with ample time to get to know him. 153 The reason for the common denominator is because the redemptive story is interwoven into the future history of mankind, with both appearing throughout the creation account. Both are correct because they are based on the same formula. 6 is the number of man, who was created on the 6th day, 1 is the number of God, who repeatedly tells us that he is one. Bring them together and you have the ideal result, also known as a reconciled relationship. In 6 days, God created, and on the 7th, the Sabbath, he observed and celebrated what he had achieved. So, it shall be with us. As is the case with the Sabbath, mankind shall toil for 6,000 years before resting and reflecting during the celebration of the 7th and final Mikra, that of Sukkah, shelters, also known as tabernacles but meaning, to camp out with God, in 2033, year 6,000 year. Therefore, we are still living in the 6th day of creation. God and man still have much to accomplish. Yisrael and Yahweh remain estranged from Yahweh, and they will be reconciled prior to Yahweh's return with his son on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations in 6,000 year, October 2, 2033, at sunset in Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. When God's people come home at long last, we will all celebrate Sukkah as it was intended. So, while time is fleeting, we will not rest until the 7th day dawns with the return of the ultimate Yahweh, the King of Israel, the Messiah Daud and his father, Yahweh, our God. If the willingness to date the inevitable seems presumptuous at this point, rest assured that God's timeline will be firmly established long before we have completed the first few volumes of Yada Yahowah. God's plan is so simple and clear, it has taken the onslaught of nearly 6 millennia of religious corruption to obscure the obvious. 154 As for the often cited, Christian excuse that no one knows the hour of God's return, rest assured we will obliterate this objection, turning a perceived criticism into an astounding confirmation. What we have already discovered represents an amazing, yet seldom considered, verification of the veracity of Yahweh's witness, but there is much more. You see, the flow of time did not remain constant during the 6 days of cosmic conception, at least from our perspective looking back. That is because the amount of matter and the rate of stretching at the center of creation diminished over this period at a logarithmic rate approximating natural spirals. Time sped up in parallel with universal expansion. The infinite curve underlying this phenomenon is manifest in the graceful swirls evident in spiral galaxies, representing 72% of all galaxies, and in the turn of every Nautilus shell or ram's horn. Moving from inside out, each successive spiral of the common galactic arms, or shell rings, telescope outward at a rate approximating twice the previous distance. Based on the way living cells grow, you'll find a similar ratio in everything from flower petals to pineapples and pine cones. There are 3 widely accepted formulas used to quantify this natural geometric expansion. The first is known as the golden ratio. Calculated as the square root of 5 plus 1 divided by 2, it yields a ratio of 1 to 6,180,339,887. In his galactic observations, Johannes Kepler equated this proportion to what has been called the Fibonacci sequence of 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233, where each additional number is the sum of the 2 previous values. It serves as the best whole number approximation of the irrational golden ratio. A third logarithmic scale defines the exponential rates of decay of radioactive atoms known as a half-life. 155 Based upon Yahweh's testimony and the empirical evidence, we can deduce that the clock at the center of creation became more closely synchronized with an Earth-based timepiece at a rate of approximately 50% per cosmic day. As confirmation, this diminishment is evident in the relative scale of subjects covered in the creation account itself, from its focus on the universe on day 1, to the solar system and Earth, to plants and the atmosphere, then to animals, and eventually to man in successive periods. This logarithmic spiral is pertinent because when we apply the celestial unit of measure, and that revealed through a ram's horn, to the creative timeline described in the Torah, we discover that each of the 6 days of creation coincides perfectly with verifiable developments in the cosmos and here on Earth. Yahweh's insights regarding this telescoping unit of measure are manifest in the opening lines of the 19th Mizmor, Psalm. Its words are as riveting as they are precise. Concerning the approach of, La, 4, 2, and regarding, the eternal and glorious leader, Ha-Nazak, the unending and everlasting splendor and majesty of the ultimate director, the one who endeavors to continuously guide a song, mizmor, these lyrics and melody, of, La, Daud, the beloved, commonly known as David. The heavens, Harshamim, the realm of stars and universe, quantify the unit of measure, exactly and accurately, sapar, recount and relate, number and reckon, record and proclaim, providing a census to convey, of the manifestation of power and the abundant presence, kabod, the profusion and richness, the energy and massiveness, the elegance and great beauty, as well as the rewarding gift, of God, El, the Almighty. Its spreading out in a flat expanse, hierarchia, its expansion and transformation into matter which is round, 156 yet thin, makes conspicuous, nagad, makes known, enabling a verdict, reporting this information for a purpose, declaring the message which presents and acknowledges, his handiwork, Yada Yahowah, the ability to evaluate and ponder his work, actions, influence, achievements and power involved in creation, a compound of to question and asar, to engage and act with yod, hand, power, strength and control. 19-1. Day unto day, yaum la yaum, pours out, nobber, gushes forth, spewing out, a proliferation of answers, omer, words of intent, promises and proclamations, declarations and announcements. Night unto night, Layla la Layla, reveals, Torah, makes known and illuminates, displays and explains, knowledge which leads to understanding, Dorth, information which facilitates comprehension regarding the implications of these relationships. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:1-2. This passage is particularly astute. We turn to it to help us properly evaluate the Bersith timeline. And it does exactly that with the precision of sapar, to quantify the unit of measure, exactly and accurately. Yahowah is as skilled at creation as he is at communication. In addition to telling us that the enormity of his power is evident in the universe, he told us to use the stars to compute creation's timeline. Galactic formations are most often logarithmic spirals where each successive arm extends approximately twice the distance from the center as the previous one. Even in the details, this rings true. Recent maps of the universe have revealed that it is a hierarchia, flat expanse, expanding in a manner which is round, yet thin. According to the inspiration Yahowah offered David, God's very presence, indeed the verification of his existence, is manifested day and night before our eyes. The universe was created and thus had a creator. Its enormity 157 reveals God's power and influence. Its design necessitates a designer. And it is all magnificent and harmonious, addressing God's nature and intent. The fact that we can observe and ponder these things, such that they lead us to the same conclusions, not only speaks to the merit of these words but also suggests that this is all fundamental to our existence. Since no accounting of universal genesis would be complete without a complement of insights into the mind of God, profound truth is woven into the song's narrative. So, although we have already found the answer we were searching for, the unit of measure for our cosmological timeline, by considering the rest of the Mizmor, Psalm we will grow wiser still. The lyrics and implications of Daud's 19th song are among the most brilliant and insightful ever written by man. Through his son, Yahowah reveals. Nothing exists without, Ein, there is no existence, and it would all be for naught, empty, negated, and senseless, unsearchable and inscrutable, calling everything into question without, the word, Omer, the answers and promises, these declarations and announcements, that which has been spoken and its intent. Everything is senseless and nothing matters when, Ein, and therefore, our existence is nullified where, the spoken and written words of, Dabarim, the statements, accounts and message, the record and treatise of what has and will happen, communicated by, the voice which calls out to them, Kaulhem, the audible and intelligent sound of speech, is considered outdated, is corrupted or denigrated, and is therefore not, Bailey, is considered old and thus arcane and worn out, muted, becoming unimportant, is diminished in relevance, is gone without or negated so as not, heard, shama, received, perceived, or processed. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:3. 158. When we think about it, it becomes immediately obvious that Yahowah is right. Words are essential. Nothing meaningful exists without them. Emphasizing this, Bersith repeats, and God said before each creative event, each day all the way to and God said let us make man in our image. Without his words we would not exist. And without the written report Yahowah gave us in his Torah, teaching, these very words we are currently considering, there would be no hope of knowing God or of engaging in the covenant relationship with him. The use of words, particularly written words, distinguishes humankind from other animals. It is how we obtain information from our past and pass it on to future generations. Words are the building blocks of knowledge and understanding. The last line suggests that ignorance and inspiration are related in a surprising way. If we knew everything, there would be no new insights and no discoveries. So, while ignorance isn't bliss, it is also true that the life of a know-it-all would be tedious and uninspiring, especially over eternity. In this regard, this statement was prophetic of the diabolical nature of the Christian New Testament, particularly as Paul sought to create the impression it was needed to resolve God's inadequacy. In his view, the Torah was obsolete. Forewarning us, Dowd, who is the antidote for Paul's poison, wrote, "Everything becomes senseless, and nothing God said matters when the written words of the voice which calls out are considered outdated, then corrupted and denigrated, therefore, no longer considered." This accurately describes the mythos of Christianity. There are additional insights here because dabarim is plural, meaning words. Without language, we are 159 rendered senseless and powerless as it is the source of enlightenment and of causality. We think with words and act upon them. Language is God's gift to humankind. In written form, it emerged 6,000 years ago, contemporaneously with the first man created in Yah's image. Words are the source of life, and the means to relationships. As such, Yahweh is saying that if we fail to regard his message, if we diminish the importance of his word, we will cease to exist, returning to the dust from which we came. Before we consider the next line in the song, I would like to point out something which is foundational. God's equation for life is sensible and fair. If you prioritize Yahweh and his word, highly regarding him and carefully listening to what he has to share, Yahweh will reciprocate. He will respond to you and value your soul, not only to save it but to actually adopt you into his covenant family. But if you do not care sufficiently about him, if you elect to accept a corruption of his message, if you ignore his voice, he will ignore your soul. Having chosen to live your life apart from him, death will be the end of your existence. There will be nothing more because your soul will be seen as having the same value you placed on the source of life. Such souls are diminished to nothingness, which means they simply cease to exist. And while that may strike you as harsh, it's not only completely fair, it's a far better fate than eternal anguish in Sheol. Moving on, there are three ways to consider what follows, all of which are meritorious. Yahweh's Torah, instruction is the universal standard, it undergirds the laws of nature, and the Gentile of life. The word of Yahweh is the source of mankind's mortal existence as well as immortality. And the heavens accurately calibrate Yah's power. This standard of measure, Kohem, this ability to assess the underlying rules and overall size which binds 160 everything together and provides hope as in a confident expectation, has gone forth, Yatsa, been brought up and produced as an extension of the source, concerning, Bar, in association with, all the material realm, Shel Ha-Eres, the entire earth, along with, Wa, together with, these words, Milahim Hem, these reasoned arguments and verbal portraits. These communications and proverbs characterizing the truth of this affair, to the uttermost outskirts, Barkatseh, to a point marking the completion of an epoch, to expose the end and the finite nature of time and space, of the earth, Tebel, the world or planet. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:4. Everything fits together and is consistent, from the creation of the universe to its inevitable conclusion, from the similarity between light and the Hebrew language, it all forms an integrated portrait of who we are and why we were conceived. More than any words ever spoken or written, Yah's word has been known longer and by more people than any other message, affirming the prophecy. However, on the dark side, this has created the opportunity for it to be misquoted, twisted, and misapplied more than any message ever written. In this light, there is another interesting possibility since cause secondary meaning is the strange blah, blah, blah of nonsensical statements, spoken in a foreign language to mock, especially the meaningless guttural rhythmic chants, spoken by marchers. Translated as such, Dowd could be seeking to demean both the supposedly enlightened who claim there is no God along with the dunderheads who march against everything Yahweh stands for while chanting irritating and senseless slogans. To fully appreciate what follows, we need to know that Bersith, using the sun as a sign, and the mode, appointed meetings as a guide, portends that on the fourth day, or fourth millennia of mankind's history, the Mikra 161 vertical bar invitations to be called out and meet with God will be fulfilled. In this light, please consider. Along with these words, Wahem, in them, masculine plural, and thus denoting the Dabarim and Milahim, words, both masculine plural, from 11 QPS, he has set up, Sim, he has for a time appointed and established, constituted and fashioned, brought about and placed, a brilliant dwelling, ohel, household and home, a sheltered tent and temporary tabernacle, from Al, to be bright, to be clear, to be brilliant, and to shine, speaking of Dowd, such that this would be clear regarding the approach of the sun, La Ha-Shemesh. On behalf of clarity provided by the brilliance of sunlight, Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:4. Yahweh is not constructing a palatial residence for our nearest star. He is instead saying that his words will live in his home, shining brightly on behalf of his family. Based upon other psalms written by Dowd, it is likely that Shemesh is a metaphor for Yahweh's most brilliant orator. God is hereby honoring his promise to build a home for Yisrael's returning Messiah and King. Moreover, Dowd's brilliance is equated to the sun at the conclusion of the 89th Mizmor, Psalm. As we consider the conclusion to Dowd's statement, realize that he was a bridegroom 8 times, Mihal, Ahinoam, Abigail, Mocha, Haggith, Abital, Eglah, and Bathsheba. Moreover, Dowd metaphorically became Yah's son-in-law by marrying the prophetess, Abigail, a Yahudi, whose name means my father is joyful. It was Dowd, therefore, who traveled from his wedding pavilion, delighted to marry a woman, who was similarly inspired by Yah. Dowd is also the paradigm for Yahowah, an empowered leader with the strength to prevail. He was and will return as the mighty warrior, valiant soldier, and virtuous hero 162 defending his people. He was, and upon his return as king will once again be, a manly man with prominence in the community. He has influenced, a man who was audacious and will continue to be courageous, awe-inspiring, and victorious. Similar to, like, as or comparable to, a bridegroom, Chatan, and son-in-law, the husband of the father's daughter, who goes forth, Yatsa, who leaves, extending himself to serve, from, Min, the tent he has erected for the wedding ceremony, Chupahu, his sheltered pavilion and bridal chamber for the upcoming nuptials and to consummate his marriage. He confidently and joyously speaks about his love for relationship, Suz. He expresses his fond feelings of appreciation for the association and how much he enjoys it, consistent with, comparable to, the power and strength of a virtuous and victorious fighter, a competent and courageous man, Yahowah, the character of a leader with the strength to prevail, the nature of a mighty warrior, valiant soldier, and honorable hero defending his people, a manly man with prominence in the community he influences, who is audacious and awe-inspiring, who swiftly and intensely pursues, La Ruse, who drives off pursuers, aggressively chasing them away while summarily following, the way, Arak, the road to life, the route to travel, the path to explore, the example of conduct, and the course to journey in the right company. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:5. Thankfully, with these edits of Yada Yahowah, one during the summer of 2020 and the next 3 years later in 2023, I have been afforded the opportunity to give God's Son the credit he is due. As our Savior, Dowd is so much more than Messiah and King. In that it matters, I am likely the first person in 3 millennia to realize that David is the Son of God, the Messiah, and the returning King, as well as our Savior 163 since he fulfilled the Mikra, while also acknowledging that these attributes, accolades, and accomplishments were misappropriated from him to create the myth of Jesus Christ. I share this with you because, to navigate the path to God, we must shatter myths while exposing truth. Over time, there will be others who parrot these deductions, but for all the wrong reasons. Charlatans will seek to advance their own agenda by claiming credit for my translations, transliterations, commentary, and conclusions. Some have tried to create their own religion by taking something which is true, such as Yahowah's name, his affinity for Hebrew, or his love of Yisrael, and then go off on some ridiculous tangent. The Black Israelites, Hebrew roots, Jews for Jesus, Messianics, and Yahwehists are examples of those who remain far more wrong than right. There are even those who advance absurd conspiracies, who are anti-Semitic and plagiarize my work. Please avoid them. And third, it is actually important that these translations and transliterations reveal thousands of profound insights, previously unknown, many of which are exceedingly important. The sheer magnitude of verifiable insights offered here and nowhere else strongly suggests divine involvement and support. Transitioning from brilliant metaphors back to science, and then returning to Yahowah's timeline once again, the bridegroom, God's mighty Yahowah, and the man devoted to pursuing the way revealed the following about himself. His going forth at this stage of his journey occurs, Motzahu. His pronouncements during this incremental part of his very long mission will be conducted from a place of departure such that his declarations are, from Yatsa, to go forth, at the completion of a long duration of time and commences from the limits, minimum 164 Katsei, in association with a period marking the conclusion of a prescribed interval of time at the confluence of dimensions regarding finishing the purpose, of the heavens. Hashamim, of the abode of God and spiritual realm. His return to complete his course of action will continue, Watakwafahu. His trajectory and established course for each stage of his journey, his ability to encompass time and space and complete the circuit of events, bringing all things back to where they began, cycle forward, from Nakaf, continue to occur, until their fulfillment at the end, Wa al-Katsahem, are distant in lesser dimensions. And then, nothing, Wa'ain, will be hidden, Satar, is concealed, from, Min, his warmth and light, Shamahu, his sunlight, often transliterated chama, from cham, warmth, mizmor, song, Psalm 19:6. When Yahweh returns, he is bringing his beloved Son with him. At that time, we will bask in their warm and brilliant light. Nothing will be hidden when Yahweh fulfills one of his most beneficial prophecies, placing his Torah, guidance inside of his children upon his return, integrating his instruction into the fabric of our lives. Our review of the 19th Mizmor, Psalm brings us to one of Daud's most vital lines. It unequivocally establishes the prophet's position on Yahweh's Torah, teaching. It reveals that the Son of God, and Messiah was resolutely Torah observant. Therefore, it puts Daud, the beloved and Shaul, question him in irresolvable conflict. Being on the wrong side of this conflict is deadly for the religious. With this one statement, and in just 7 words, the Messiah destroyed the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Most everything Paul, Akiba, and Muhammad wrote was exposed and contradicted by the testimony of 165, the very God all 4 of these men claimed to represent. As such, the lone informed and rational conclusion which can be drawn from these irreconcilable differences is that they lied. And that means that the religions they founded are untrustworthy and unreliable. Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher existence, Torah, source of teaching and instruction, direction and guidance, plural in 11 QPS, is correct, complete, and perfect. Tamim, is entirely right, lacking nothing, without defect, totally sound and genuine, helpful and healing, beneficial and true, manifesting great integrity because it is in accord with reality, returning and restoring, shub, changing and transforming, bringing back and renewing, reconstituting the relationship and repairing, the soul, nipesh, an individual's consciousness representing the essence of their life and character, personality, proclivities and aptitude, a person's perspective, the ability to observe and respond. Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, testimony, ejuth, eternal witness, from ed, everlasting verbal and written memorialization of the perpetual agreement, including evidence and proof, from ed and eda. An eternal witness to an enduring and restoring agreement concerning a glorified community of the highest possible status which gathers together with a shared understanding regarding the evidence, and in a common cause which is being memorialized so that its conditions and precepts are forever remembered, is trustworthy and reliable, a man, is instructive and informative, verifiable and readily confirmed, supportive and established, dependable and enduring, making understanding, calm, enabling the formation of 166 reasoned conclusions by imparting the teaching, instruction, and education needed to make learning and enlightenment leading to comprehension and wisdom, easy for those who are receptive, pethy, simple for the open-minded and readily deduced for those with the capacity to change, from patha, open and receptive and pithak, unfolding events leading to opening and entering the doorway. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:7. Since Yahweh's Torah is correct, Paul's letters assailing it, and rabbinical tomes augmenting it, must be invalid. Therefore, there can be no justification for the Christian New Testament or Talmud. There can be no divine sanction for the rabbinic Zohar or Islamic Quran. It is hard to imagine anything more polarizing or unaccommodating. To believe in any of these religions in light of this declarative statement, the faithful must disavow God's testimony. According to God, and there is no higher authority on the subject, the means to shub, restoration and return is found in his Torah, guidance. If you want your soul to transcend your mortality, then you know where to look. In this passage, shub was scribed in the hyphal stem. This means that we are influenced by and benefit from the relationship established between our nipesh, soul and Yah's Torah, teaching. This is what leads to our restoration and renewal. Further, shub was written in the participle form, telling us that these benefits modify our souls, changing us so that we can return to God. Ejuth is such a simple concept, it is easy to miss its profound implications. It reveals that these words comprise Yahweh's testimony. They are provided from the perspective of an eyewitness to the events being depicted. Ejuth even reveals the inspiration behind the ideas being shared. As an all-encompassing witness, God has provided an everlasting verbal and written 167 memorialization of the perpetual agreement, offering the evidence required to prove his veracity. A man, like Ejuth, proclaims that faith is for fools. There is no reason to believe when we can trust and rely upon what we know to be true. The evidence God provides is not only instructive, it is verifiable, which is to say, easily confirmed. His testimony is enduring and dependable. Also noteworthy, a man was written in the nifil participle absolute. This means that trust and reliance are actionable and that they are linked to Yah's witness. His testimony facilitates our ability to verify and confirm that what we are reading is true. There is a prerequisite for trust. It is understanding. Without it, we are back to believing. Therefore, Yahowah is committed to teaching us, imparting instructions which help us learn. When we observe and consider his Torah teaching, we are equipped to make reasonable decisions and form rational conclusions. Knowledge is good, but understanding is far better. And while one can lead to the other, most never make the connection between the two. This detrimental result is by human design. Those who rise to positions of power and influence do not take kindly to rivals, and the best way to prevent the ascension of others is to circumvent understanding. This can be done by restricting access to information, offering inaccurate information, or providing so much of it that society is lost in a sea of data. It can also be accomplished by incapacitating a person's ability to think for themselves and thus to exercise good judgment. Such is the role of political correctness and its debilitating consequence. 168 By contrast, I cannot help but marvel and rejoice at the realization that Yahowah is fair, consistent, forthright, forgiving, and merciful. Everything he says makes sense, as we would expect from God. Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher existence and our shalom, reconciliation, principles, directions, and guidance, Pequim, instructions and prescriptions which should be considered and acted upon regarding the assigned appointments, as well as the precepts, procedures, and guidelines, because when they are observed, attended to, and cared about, this oversight enables the individual and their circumstances to undergo considerable change, from pakad, oversight and caring guidance which we should pay especially close attention to and carefully examine so that we respond appropriately and benefit as intended, are on the level and correct, yashar, are straightforward, and thus neither crooked or circuitous, upright, and thus do not include bowing down, and agreeable, and thus neither unsuitable or discordant, neither incongruous nor harsh. They are approved, esteemed, right, proper, honest, fair, likable, and pleasing, resulting in joyful disposition and elated attitude, leib samak, facilitating an attitude of elation, causing the heart to be delighted, as a result of thoughtfully evaluating the directions while happily incorporating them into one's life, peel construct. The quest to know and understand is satisfied by his oversight when a connection is made between his guidance and our decisions. Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, instructions regarding the conditions pursuant to his relationship agreement, mitzvah, his authorized stipulations pertaining to the codicils of his 169 mutually binding covenant contract, create heirs who are brilliant and enlightened, providing light for his offspring which leads to understanding, creating supernatural children who are radiant, fostering favoritism among those choosing to participate in a special relationship as sons and daughters, conceiving descendants who are bright and pure, akin to cleansed and purified grain, paving the way to an inheritance, to enlightenment, and to comprehension, illuminating the proper perspective, or ein, shining a light for the eyes to see, enabling insightful observation and understanding. Shedding a brilliant light on the means to enlightenment and thereby obliterating darkness while making the perceptive person aware and thus able to see the light, Hiphil construct, the conditions of the relationship cause the observant individual to become light and to be bound to the source of the light. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:8. Mitzvah is a compound comprised of meaning to inquire about the who, what, why, when, where, and how of a matter, and zawah, which is a verb. If we were to rely exclusively on the lexicons, our understanding would be limited to it meaning, command, order, tell, instruct, or give direction to someone pertaining to how they should respond in the context of the relationship between the speaker and the recipient. It is to appoint and assign a role or function. To this, other Hebrew, English dictionaries indicated that zawah can be rendered, urge, guide, enjoin, determine, arrange, constitute, and commission. Cognizant of the harmonious nature of the father-son relationship Daud enjoyed with Yahowah, in concert with the familial nature of the covenant, and with an eye to God's affinity for free will, our only rational option is to interpret zawah as to tell, to instruct, or to give direction pursuant to a specific set of conditions. In the context of a relationship between the speaker and the recipient of the 170 instructions, zawah addresses that which is arranged and constituted as instructive provisions and stipulations of the relationship. Then in conjunction with the my interrogative prefix, we are being encouraged to question and ponder the who, what, where, why, when, and how of these specifications and requirements. As a result, I have consistently chosen to render mitzvah as terms and conditions of the agreement, which is, in this context, the stipulations and provisions of the covenant. Validating my approach, Yahowah first appears in Bersith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:16. Let's check it out since our lives depend upon getting Yahowah's instructive conditions regarding the relationship agreement right. It does not seem plausible, considering the setting and the nature of their relationship, that Yahowah would have been issuing a commandment to Adam, but I will let you decide. Then, Yahowah Almighty provided instructions regarding the relationship, Yahowah, on behalf of Adam, approaching to say, "From every tree of the garden you may eat all you would like. However, from the tree of understanding good and bad, of being able to comprehend the difference between that which is beneficial or wrong, you should not make a habit of eating from it. This is because, in the day you eat from it, the ongoing spectre of death will be the inevitable result." Bersith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:16-17. If Yahowah were a command, there would have been no reason for the explanation. And yet, as an instruction to thoughtfully consider, it is in perfect harmony with Adam being granted free will in this regard. While I see this proving my point, consider this affirmation inherent in Yahowah's second up-close and 171 personal relationship was with Noah. Regarding God's volunteer shipbuilder and life-saver, we read, Noah acted, doing everything which was beneficial to the relationship that God had instructed in the process of guiding and commissioning him, Yahowah Ethu. And in this manner, he consistently engaged. Bersith, in the beginning, Genesis 6:22. If Yahowah were interested in acquiring a cargo ship having no connection with the covenant, he would have built it himself. If God were desirous of becoming an admiral with the captain of the ark at his beck and call, why bother with the doves, olive branches and rainbows? Why talk about Noah at all if he was just thoughtless muscle-shouldering lumber and following orders? Why create man at all, since robots reliably perform as programmed? Since Dowd wrote this Mizmor, it would be fair to say that his characterization of Yahowah should be definitive, surpassing the opinions of scholars composing lexicons 3,000 years thereafter. The first time he dealt with the implication of Yahowah was right after his anointing as Mashiach on Yahowah's instructions. At this point, Yahowah's Spirit came upon him to empower, enlighten, and enable him. To those in the know, at this moment, and for years thereafter, Dowd became the most important person on the planet. In that light, these are among the words a father spoke to his son. Dowd arose early in the morning and left the flock with an observant individual. Inspired and free of concerns, he set out, traveling in a way which was consistent with Yeshay's instructive conditions and guidance regarding the relationship with him, Yahowah. Shamuel, listen to him, 1 Samuel 17:20. 172 Shay was Dowd's father, not his superior officer barking out an order. He most assuredly was not a wannabe god issuing a commandment. And it is evident that Dowd capitalized upon this guidance because he would soon confront Goliath. Since the initial reference to Yahowah, the actionable aspect of mitzvah, in conjunction with Dowd precludes command, order, or commandment, I think we are on solid ground in eliminating these incompatible notions from our translations. Continuing through the text, we next come upon Bar, which was translated as create heirs who are brilliant and enlightened. It is a particularly revealing term with three related connotations. It speaks of a perfected son, of his pure radiant light, and of how his enlightenment leads to understanding. These are all Dowdian concepts. Bar is also the path to purification leading to an inheritance and thus is indicative of matzah, unyeasted bread and bikurim, firstborn children. It is first used in the second Mizmor, Psalm, where speaking of our heavenly fathers and spiritual mother's beloved son, Dowd, David, we read, with reverence and respect, even admiration, work alongside Yahowah with great excitement, rejoicing over the prospect. Mizmor, Psalm 2:11. Reach out and touch, contacting as a sign of affection, demonstrating your mutual adoration for the relationship, Nashak, passionately brush up against and demonstrate your affinity for, with the radiant and favorite son, the brilliant and purifying heir, Bar, the illuminating and enlightening child with an inheritance who chose to provide moral cleansing and intellectual understanding, selected and dispatched, to conceive supernatural children who are radiant, fostering favoritism among those choosing to participate in this special 173 relationship as sons and daughters who are bright, thereby paving the way to an inheritance, lest, to eliminate any apprehension that, he becomes indignant and displeased, anaf, he becomes angry and averse, and you perish, abad, in this way, Derek. For indeed, his righteous indignation, afu, can be kindled, bar, for a few and for very little, meat, comparatively, joyful with me and blessed by me, Asheri, fortunate in the relationship with me, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life with me providing the proper place to stand and live as a benefit, are all, Shirl, who put their trust in him, Chaser Bar Hugh. Mizmor, Psalm 2:12. The magnificence of Mizmor 19-8 concludes brilliantly, with or ein, illuminating the proper perspective. The radiance of Yahweh's beloved Son shines a light for our eyes to see, enabling insightful observations leading to understanding, providing enlightenment to obliterate the darkness. As we explore Yahweh's testimony, it is not uncommon for us to progress through a host of reactions. My first response is usually awe, as I am impressed with Yah's profound insights, his creativity and consistency, as well as his literary skill. As a result, I have grown from questioning faith and belief to absolute trust and reliance. That does not mean that my amplified translations are perfect, because they are not. I am admittedly not a Hebrew scholar, but there is more than enough here to demonstrate that the thoughts being shared in bold are divinely inspired and thus completely trustworthy. My next reaction is usually thankfulness, especially as I contemplate the enormous generosity of his plan for us as well as the great price Father and Son paid to enable it. The way of the Torah is so well communicated, so 174 completely fair, so beautifully laid out and timed, so overwhelmingly compassionate and merciful. I am overwhelmingly grateful. I am also enveloped with a great sense of companionship and familial love as I consider what it really means to be adopted into the eternal family of our Heavenly Father. I often ponder what it will be like to camp out with him, exploring and discussing those things which are currently beyond my physical reach and mental grasp. In this relaxed relationship, I am sure that we will laugh at my crude attempts to translate and communicate his word, and yet smile, knowing that, empowered by the Spirit, our work together changed many lives. And yet, sometimes I experience frustration, even anger, as I ponder the word. It is a crying shame that God so clearly laid out the way to him, and so eloquently and brilliantly verified the veracity of his revelation, only to have it corrupted and demeaned by religious, political, and academic institutions. The truth is evident, and yet so very few find it. Yahweh deserves our respect. He has earned our trust. Not just for his sake, but for our own. Reverence and respect for, Yireh, demonstrating a profound appreciation for what it means to be revitalized and restored while astonished by the awesomeness of the superior nature of, Yahweh, Yahweh, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, is cleansing and restoring, Towrah, is perfecting and renewing, enabling individuals to present themselves for purification so that they can be pronounced clean and flawless, free of all impurities and majestically brilliant, sustaining and establishing one's presence, Amod, causing one to remain and endure, continuing to abide standing upright and present, Cal 175 participle, forever, La ad, for eternity as a result of the witness, to approach and draw near the source of the testimony for an unlimited duration of time. Yahweh's, Yahweh, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, means to exercise good judgment, and to justly resolve disputes, Mishpat, the means used to achieve justice and to make sound decisions, from my, to ponder the who, where, why, when, and how of Shafot, rendering rational decisions based upon thoughtful evaluations of accurate and complete information, are continually trustworthy and reliable, Emeth, are enduring, dependable, honest, consistent, and true forever. They are right and vindicating, Zadek Yador, they are of one accord working in harmony and in unison to prove one's innocence, all together and united, correct and justifying, causing the recipient to be upright, acceptable, cleared of all wrongdoing, righteous and acquitted, Cal perfect. Mizmor, melodious lyrics, Psalm 19:9. The path to restoration and vindication, to standing in God's presence for all eternity, is through demonstrating sufficient respect and reverence for him and his word, the Torah. Respect Yah, his way, and his word, and Yah will revere you sufficiently to adopt you into his family. Designating the nature of this reverent relationship, Yahweh uses Amod to convey that he wants us to be upright and unbowed, standing in his presence. While it is customary to bow down before those who oppress and in front of those whom we have reason to fear, it is inappropriate to cower before someone you love. Loving fathers want their sons and daughters to stand by their side, to walk with them, not grovel at their feet. After telling Abraham to leave the religious and political schemes of 176 Babylon, Yahweh asked the father of the covenant to stand and walk with him. The Torah was written to liberate and save, not control or condemn. Its purpose is to guide us to a relationship and away from religion. Everything we need to know about Yahweh is presented therein. The Torah gives life meaning. When it comes to knowing God and being saved by him, everything that matters is revealed in the Torah. As such, God did not authorize and will not accept a New Testament or Quran to undo what he has done. And yet, these religious texts and others exist to enrich the perpetrators, the covetous mongrels who did not listen to God. For those who may currently be misled by an out-of-context and errant rendering of "judge not lest you be judged," recognize that the statement actually conveys, "Don't separate, or you'll be separated." God does not want us to lead souls away from Him, but since being judgmental is the essence of justice, of morality, of logic and reason, of understanding, and thus of making wise choices, He values judgment. In spite of this, the moral code of man, political correctness, makes being judgmental an unforgivable sin. To be honest with ourselves and true to our God, we should test everything which claims to be divinely inspired to determine what is reliable, and what is seeking to give a false impression. Ascertaining the veracity of a witness message, especially someone who claims to have been divinely inspired, can be a matter of life and death. No matter how many people believe or the fervor of one's faith, being religious, charitable, and good is not going to save anyone. As an example, it might be helpful if someone wrote the following passage on a slip of paper and inserted it into 177 the offering plate of their local church instead of money, as the pastor or priest flattered his enriching patrons. Desire and covet them, Harchamid, treasure them and find pleasure in the Mishpat, means to exercise good judgment and resolve disputes, more than, min, rather than, money, zahab, gold, beyond anything man considers worthy, wa min pars rab, instead of what man has refined and values. They are sweeter and more pleasing than honey, wa matauk min dabash. The Mishpat, means to exercise good judgment and resolve disputes are more satisfying and pleasant, agreeable and acceptable, even more enjoyable than sugar, or the overflowing flattery of enticing words, wa nothith chup, or the uplifting of excessively sweet-sounding speech and verbal gymnastics or the brandishing of honeycombs. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:10. Yahowah has conceived and implemented a plan to resolve the issues which divide us. The decisions we make regarding His approach determine the eternal fate of our souls. Dowd is encouraging us to do as he has done, which is to exercise good judgment regarding them and to treasure them. And in the process, as a natural consequence of the proper response to his Torah, we will naturally become opposed to man's religious and political alternatives, no matter how sweet and enticing they may sound. Continuing to speak of Yahowah's Mishpat, means to exercise good judgment regarding resolving disputes and making rational decisions, Dowd writes. Moreover, Gam, also in addition, your co-worker, Ebed Otter, he who serves with you, is educated and enlightened by them, Zahar Bahem, he shines brilliantly because of them and is taught by them, thereby helping him 178 achieve a higher status and earn respect, even coming to know the consequences of future events. By focusing upon and observing them, Barshem, by closely examining and carefully considering them, there are tremendous rewards and abundant benefits, Ekeb Rab, there is a profound consequence and great merit along with an abundance of trustworthy compensation. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:11. Eternal life is a nice reward, as is being perfected by God. Considering what we inherit, adoption into His family, is highly recommended. Being empowered and enlightened sounds good, too. The obvious aside, this is what Dowd got out of observing Yahowah's Torah, instructions. Suffice it to say, if it was this beneficial for the Son of God and the Messiah, it is suitable for us as well. And now you know the reason our excursions into related revelations are thorough rather than superficial. The investment of our time is always rewarded when we stay the course and go above and beyond the first stop along the way. While David was among the brightest men who ever lived, and unquestionably the best informed regarding the issues vital to our survival, he knew his limitations. That cannot be said of political and religious aspirants. Who has the ability to apprehend, my bin, asking the question, who can perceive or comprehend, or how would we form the connections to understand, a misleading statement or lapse in judgment, shagyar, an error or mistake, willful or inadvertent ignorance, from shaga, an error which leads astray, which intoxicates and clouds one's judgment, misleading them, among that which is either unknown or unknowable, min satar, 179 from that which is concealed from our purview, or is beyond our capacity to know. I am innocent of such charges, Naka Eni, I am not guilty of doing this. Mizmor, Song, Psalm 19:12. Whether it is trying to comprehend the nature of dark energy or the fourth dimension, there is much which eludes us. For example, it is all but impossible for us to wrap our brains around anything beyond the 3D world in which we exist. Complicating matters, a physical being cannot enter the fourth dimension. And even if we could, we do not have the mental prowess to navigate it or the capacity to endure it. The energy in the fourth dimension would incinerate us. The noise, therein, would overpower us. The dynamic instability would evaporate us. Moreover, even if we could survive, the computations needed to function in 4D would overwhelm us. It would be as caustic to us as trying to slice and dice ourselves to fit into 2 dimensions. This realization, this perspective of our place in creation, is one of the many reasons that I think the Torah, Guidance Yahowah will be integrating into our thought processes upon his return will include instructions necessary to enjoy life in the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions. This subject is one we will explore at great length when we consider the promised reconciliation of the covenant relationship with Israel and Yahweh as it is presented in Jeremiah 31. What we will surmise is that Yahowah's existing and external Torah teaching will bring those to him who reach out and grasp hold of it, choosing to incorporate its guidance into their lives. Then Yah will be integrating his internal Torah instructions into the fabric of his children's lives on Yom Kippurim, the day of 180 reconciliations in year 6000 year, enabling his family to enjoy being together with him. The creative act of day 1 is explained with these words. God, Wa Elohim, then the Almighty, accordingly, La, called out in a welcoming way and proclaimed, Kara, he saw as inviting, summoned, and met with, issuing an invitation for us to read and recite, designating and announcing, Kal imperfect, creating an actual ongoing relationship between God and the illumination, the approaching light, Laha or, the extension and intent of the brilliant illumination, day, Yom, a unit of time, the 24 hours from sundown to sunset, from an unused root meaning hot and glowing or radiant heat, and concerning, Wala, therefore, the approach of, the darkness, Hachosk, the obscurity, that which shrouds in blackness, veils by withholding knowledge, that which clouds revelation with sinister suggestions, concealing and mystifying by way of ignorance and confusion with the absence of light, from Shashak, to conceal by eliminating the light, he called it, Kara, he designated it, calling it out as, Kal perfect, actually limiting its time, making its existence finite, night, Layla, time of darkness and gloom. The absence of light, from an unused root meaning to fold back space and time and enclose. Bersith, in the beginning, Genesis 1:5. It is telling to see Kara used this early in Yahowah's accounting of creation because Mikra, which means to ponder the implications of Kara, serves as the title of God's 7 annual invitations to be called out and meet. Collectively, they comprise the path home and provide 181 each of the covenant's benefits. They not only comprise the 7 essential days on Yahowah's yearly calendar, Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, Shavuot, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, Daud's fulfillment of each are days we should all celebrate. The Mikra, invitations to be called out and meet with God are so essential to life in the covenant, we devote 3 entire volumes of Yada Yahowah to them, and discuss them in every book along the way. The creator of the universe, the author of life, announced on day 1 that he would be inviting us to meet with him, welcoming us into his presence. To Kara is to read and recite the word of God. To be Kara is to be called out of the realm of man and come home to God. Kara is to be invited into God's presence and welcomed by him. Kara is Hebrew's most inviting and welcoming term. The distinction in this declaration is between light and darkness. It is the difference between enlightenment or ignorance, and thus between life or death. To be with Yeh in Shamaim, heaven is to become like him, which is to be light. Separation from him in Shaul, hell would be in eternal darkness and is, therefore, best described as a black hole. Yom is an effective and important means to express the concept of time. The Hebrew day always begins at sundown and continues up to sunset the following evening. 7 Yamim, days of course, constitute a week. Light is associated with time, not only because light defines time, but also because Yahowah's light is the source of enlightenment and life eternal. The absence of light renders us confused and imperfect, separated from God, and thus spiritually unassociated with Yahowah. Without the energy needed to survive, such souls cease to exist upon a person's earthly demise. 182 This statement reveals an especially enriching contrast between the imperfect and perfect conjugations. In the imperfect, light will be associated with Yahowah forever, with the relationship enduring throughout time. But in the perfect conjugation, darkness will only exist for a finite period of time. God's next statement is helpful in that it causes us to question the way we normally consider time. The order of things suggests looking at the creation account in reverse, from the Creator's perspective rather than our own. Yahowah has the end of the day preceding the beginning of the day, but there is more to it than that. Evening, or end of the day, is represented by Ereb, and that's where the fun begins. The 3 Hebrew letters which comprise Ereb can be rendered 5 ways, several of which seem appropriate. Boker, the word rendered as morning, or beginning of the day, has several potential meanings as well, all of which seem to fit. And there was, Wahaya, there exists with unfolding implications over time, Kal imperfect, evening, Irab, Arab, a period of darkness, a time of sadness and hopelessness, a discouraged state of foreign occupation, an era of ignorant commingling of and adherence to faiths and beliefs, a time for the adversary to intermix and of noxious swarms of Arab pests bartering and trading a great amount of something black, dominating commerce, and there would be, Wahaya. There also exists with unfolding implications over time, Kal imperfect, morning, Boker, tomorrow, the beginning of a new day, a time to be observant, perceptive, and judgmental, a time for consideration, a period to be attentive and respond appropriately, an extended stretch to be inquisitive and seek information in order to make a good decision, one day, Yom Echad, the first, a single, solitary, unique, and 183 individual day, from a card, to go one way or the other. Bersith, in the beginning, Genesis 1:5. Whether God intended to convey Arab or Arab, the implications go well beyond evening and day one of creation. The chosen people have endured a period of darkness, a time of hopelessness and despair, of biblical proportions. Indeed, there have been 25 centuries of foreign occupiers in the land of Israel. Christians and Muslims have come to believe in irrational commingling of pagan myths as noxious swarms of Arab terrorists have sought to devour the promised land. Boker is the good news, the promise of a new day. There would be a brighter future, a new beginning for God's people. And today, as was the case in the time of Moses and Daud, we all have the opportunity to be observant, to seek the information Yahowah revealed, and decide how to respond. With Boker, the perceptive and discerning can contemplate the merit of the Mikra and make a good decision about God, aware of what he is offering and asking in return. During this time of universal Genesis, there would have been no shortage of darkness or light as energy was being transformed into matter, space, and time. Everything was mixing together and joining to form the interwoven fabric we call the cosmos. It was as pleasing to God as it is to us. But let us not forget, Bersith is also God's message to us, his pledge of fellowship, and his plan of salvation, one in which he explains his undertaking and exchange, our redemption. Yahowah distinguished this day, and only this day, with a cardinal number, in this case Echad, 1. It represents a quantitative measure of a singular solitary and yet unified day, the period when the universe and time began. All other creative days are presented in relation to 184 each other, as they are called the second, third, and fourth, respectively. Echad means one, not first. Spiritually, day 1 is focused on introductions. Yahowah, who is one, tells us that he exists and that he is the reason we exist. God declares that he is creative and that words are causal and important. The Almighty further conveys that his nature can be equated to light. Day 1 is also reminiscent of Passover, the first of 7 Mikrei, invitations to be called out and meet with God which represent the path from the material realm to the spiritual. Yahowah's spirit passed over the abyss, which was obscured in darkness, bringing light which would lead to life. Historically, moving forward from creation and out of Eden, day 1 is symbolic of the first man created in Yahowah's image, and of his personal one-on-one relationship with the one who is light and spirit. It should not be surprising therefore, that including Adam's time in Eden, the first man lived nearly 1,000 years, the length of the first millennia of human history. Therefore, an earth-based clock can be used to measure time back to the commencement of the 6th day of creation. At that point, the creative timeline is chronologically synced with recorded history, both of which began just shy of 6,000 years ago. Scientifically, every nuance of Yahowah's testimony was accurate. The universe was created. It didn't always exist. It began with a Big Bang. God said, "Let there be light," and light existed. Consistent with God's accounting, light energy was transformed into matter in the formless void of space, one that was originally lifeless and very chaotic, during a time when physical laws were suspended. There was an 185 inflationary period of rapid expansion, just as Ye affirms. It was in fact when time began. Galactic formation commenced during the first relative day of this epoch, with stars filling the darkness of space with the first rays of visible light. This occurred 300,000 years into an epoch which lasted 7 billion years, plus or minus 20%. And yet, the initial phase of creation, at least from the perspective of the only eyewitness at the scene, lasted exactly one solitary day. And that is what this is all about. The Torah is Yahowah's eyewitness account of how and why he created us.